Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 449. I am so excited for today's guest. We have back on the show Dr. Neal Barnard. You were in episode 256, so it's been a while. Now we're in the 400s in our interviews. And we had you on for one of your books, The Cheese Trap, which was amazing. I highly recommend listeners go back and check out episode 256 if you haven't already. Dr. Barnard, you are on the forefront of the whole food plant-based movement, showing people that we can heal our body with food. And now you've come out with a book teaching us, especially women, how we can balance our hormones, gain fertility, breeze through menopause, and even how to manage things like cancer when it's hormone-related cancers, all using food as medicine. I'm very happy to have you back on the show.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. We did dive a bit into your bio in our last interview, and what led you to want to become a doctor that practices whole food plant-based food as a way of healing people. So I want to jump right in. Why did you write your latest book, Your Body in Balance? Why did you, what compelled you to want to help use food to balance their hormones?
Up until now, most people have thought of food in rather modest terms, that if you're eating the wrong kinds of foods, you gain weight, you change your diet, you lose weight, maybe your cholesterol will go down, your blood sugar can improve, that kind of stuff. We can be much more ambitious than that when it comes to tuning up our health. And almost every function of your body is controlled by hormones. Hormones are made in one organ. They go through the bloodstream to reach another organ, and they tell it what to do. And if you could control your hormones, let's say you can control thyroid hormone, which gives energy to your cells. You can control estrogens, which control sexual function, reproductive function. What if you could control insulin, which deals with your blood sugar levels? There are so many more. If you can control all those, you can control your health in a far more sophisticated way than you might have imagined. And amazingly enough, the key to it is food.
Why is that? Or when did you first start seeing that food had such a profound impact on hormones?
Well, it actually started out sort of by accident. I was sitting at my desk and a young woman called me up, and she had terrible menstrual pain. Now, many women have some menstrual cramps, but for maybe 1 in 10, it's just off the scale. Mm-hmm. I can't go to work today type pain. And that was her situation. And I realized I could give her painkillers for a couple of days, but what would that do for the next month or the month after that or the month after that? So I said to her, let me give you some painkillers for now, but how about if we try an experiment and see if we can prevent this from happening next month? And I have to confess, I just made an educated guess. I said, for the next 4 weeks, how about this? No animal products in your diet at all, and keep oils to a bare minimum. And she called me up 4 weeks later and said, this is the most amazing thing. My period arrived. I don't have a single cramp, nothing. And the month after that, she was completely fine. And so I then did a randomized clinical trial with Georgetown University's Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, where we tested this in a larger group of women, and it was very effective. Different women got different effects. For some, though, it just was like night and day. Anyhow, I can explain to you why that works, why that kind of diet change would affect estrogen levels. But the bottom line was I discovered that by changing the fiber content, the fat content of the food, and a few other things, we could control menstrual cramping. And if you can control that, then that in turn means you have some control over endometriosis, over fertility, mm-hmm. over all the things that estrogens will control.
This is fascinating. So you talk about not only fertility, but menopause and even the sex hormone-related cancers in your book. Do you also talk about how to reverse type 2 diabetes in your book?
Oh, yes. In fact, that's kind of what we've been really known for more than anything else. Type 2 diabetes is, of course, maybe I should just back up. The problems we've been discussing so far, like menstrual cramps or endometriosis, those are problems of estrogen. So if a woman has too much, estrogen is made in the ovaries for the most part. And if you have too much of it, it thickens up the uterine lining too much. And researchers learned a long time ago that a high fiber diet will bring it down, a lower fat diet will bring it down, and avoiding dairy products in particular will help, because dairy products have estrogens that come from cows. Mm-hmm. So I put all that together and I thought, all right, a vegan diet doesn't have any animal fat at all, and it's very high in fiber, so that's what we used, and we kept oils low, and that was the reason it cured her. But with diabetes, it's a different thing. The hormone now is not estrogens, it's insulin. It's made in the pancreas, but I can control it with a remarkably similar diet. And in 2003, the NIH gave our team a grant to try to find a better diet for controlling type 2 diabetes. And what we have found is that a diet that's really remarkably similar to the estrogen controlling diet, using an insulin controlling diet, you once again get rid of animal products. You keep oils really low, and you can do a couple of other things. And what we started to see was something we had never seen before, which was diabetes going away. I'm talking about diabetes being just gone in people who'd had it for years. And that not to say that always happens, but it almost always happens that people do improve, and they reduce their blood sugars and their medication requirements. And sometimes they just get rid of the disease, which I have to tell you is the most amazing feeling for the patient and for their own outside doctors. They have never seen a patient cure themselves of what had been an incurable disease.
If you can cure yourself of a hormone-related disease by changing your diet, then was it the food they were eating that caused the disease in the first place?
Yes. Yes, it was. And sometimes in the face of genetic vulnerabilities. But in other words, a diet loaded with Velveeta and fried chicken isn't necessarily going to cause diabetes in everybody, but it does cause it in a lot of people. Right now, about a third of the American population has either diabetes or prediabetes right now, and that is not because of sugar or bread or rice. It's not from carbohydrate. It's because of eating fatty foods that the fat gets into the muscle and liver cells, leading to a condition called insulin resistance. And we've been studying this, and then we figured out how to make it go away and we're just controlling the hormones by food.
I used to have type 2 diabetes and polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I reversed both with a whole food plant-based diet and taking supplements, as I was very deficient in minerals like chromium. And that was, for me, a complete game changer to see that changing my diet had such a profound impact on my life. And I know a woman who had such bad endometriosis that she was a friend of mine's roommate. So I saw her that once a month for a whole week, she was in bed crying, curled up in a ball, unable to work. And then she became vegetarian. She called it vegetarian, but I watched her basically cut out dairy and meat out of her diet. And I watched her be able to function now only in bed for 2 or 3 days instead of a whole week. She didn't know to give up oil. She didn't know to give up eggs. So that's, but I just saw an improvement in just that amount of switching. Why is it that eating meat, eating the flesh of an animal, disrupting hormones or increasing, making insulin, making our body be increase insulin resistance, and also increasing estrogen? Why is it having that effect on our body?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. These are all the things that they don't teach you in medical school either, I have to tell you, and we've had to discover them on our own. And maybe I shouldn't be blaming the medical schools, because much of the research just wasn't done back then. But we do have it now, and it's important for people to understand it. The means of controlling insulin it's almost the same kind of diet, but the mechanism turns out to be completely different. But let's take endometriosis. That's what your friend had, right? Where she would have just terrible, terrible cramps. For people who don't know what we're talking about, endometriosis is a really painful condition where cells that are supposed to be lining the uterus. That's called the endometrial layer, the very inside of the uterus. Those cells, which are supposed to be kind of a little cushion for when a baby is developing inside the uterus, some of those little cushiony cells have escaped. And they've flown out the fallopian tubes, and now they're in the abdominal cavity, and they implant on the intestines, or on the fallopian tubes themselves, or on the surface of the ovary. And they expand and contract, they bleed, they cause scarring, they hurt like crazy. However, it's been clear for a long time that they're driven by estrogens. They're driven by sex hormones. So if a woman has less estrogen in her blood, they're going to regress. And so the reason that I started jumping into this was I had become aware that as part of cancer research, researchers discovered that estrogen drives the growth of cancer. I mean, this is not surprising. If you have more estrogen, it makes cancer cells grow. But I found that some researchers had discovered that if you reduce fatty foods in the diet, whether it's meat fat, cheese fat, or even donut type fat, any kind of grease, if you reduce grease in the diet, it brings estrogen levels down. Completely independent of that, if you boost fiber, which means fruits and vegetables and beans, that also brings estrogens down. So that was the reason why the young woman with menstrual pain, I said, vegan diet, then there's no animal fat at all, and everything's got a lot of fiber, so it's going to be the best of all worlds. And dairy is a particular issue because dairy actually has estrogens in it that come from the cow. So you don't want to have any dairy at all in your diet. And if you do those things, people with endometriosis very often feel dramatically better. There was a young woman whose story I described in my book, Your Body in Balance. She was in the Air Force. She had terrible endometriosis. She was slated for a hysterectomy because nothing could control her symptoms. She went on the diet that I'm describing, and her endometriosis was simply gone. And what was particularly amazing was her doctor was convinced that not only would she be in pain every month because of her endometriosis, but also that it had robbed her of her fertility. This disease process was so profound. Well, not only did the diet change cure her endometriosis, but she wasn't infertile at all. She was fine. She's got 3 children now. She's still got her uterus. She's got her kids. She's got a healthy vegan diet. She's probably got a new doctor. But anyway, you see my point. You can use, how many people go to the doctor and are told your menstrual cramps, your fertility issues, your endometriosis, it's a sign of your hormones being out of balance. And here's how you choose your breakfast to get your hormones into better balance. Here's how I would choose my lunch. Here are the best snacks for you. Never happens. It's all some pharmaceutical solution that may work or it may not work.
But it really just masks it, and it doesn't address the root cause.
Or worse, you can go to the doctor and have your uterus and ovaries removed and be told that this is God's will. And when in fact it might have been the will of Kraft or McDonald's or KFC or something, but it had nothing to do with a deity bringing this on. So anyway, you asked me, why did I write Your Body in Balance? Is because I thought people need to know how to control not just diabetes and not just endometriosis or PCOS, which you were dealing with. PCOS is a hormonal condition which to a great degree is responsive to food changes and things like thyroid conditions. People don't even know where their thyroid is. All they know is, I got out of bed today. I got zero energy. I stepped on the scale and I've gained a pound since last week. I look in the mirror, my hair doesn't look right. And you go to the doctor, and these are all non-specific symptoms, but the doctor says to you, this is fitting a pattern. Let me do a blood test. And the doctor finds you're hypothyroid. You're low in thyroid. Your thyroid gland is at the base of your neck. It gives your cells energy. And when it's just not working, you just feel rotten. And so what does the doctor do? Puts you on thyroid replacement medication, which you will be on for the rest of your life. What we have discovered is that there are, in some cases, dietary causes of it that are really easy to rectify. And you may need medical care. You may well. And don't fire your doctor's appointment. You don't fire your doctor or cancel your doctor's appointment, but let's see if there's a dietary change that can get you back on track.
There's also a list of plant-based doctors. You can Google, I don't remember the name of the website, I'll probably put it in the show notes, but you can Google plant-based doctors, and there's a directory of doctors who do study your work and study these studies and want to help their patients, want to do labs and help their patients, balance their hormones, maybe using medication at first, but then also help them with their diet. So, that's something to look at. I've always gone to naturopathic doctors because they love looking at labs and diet and nutrition first before entertaining the idea of putting you on a prescription as a last ditch effort. Whereas many other doctors, like you said, it was just, this is how the schooling was, the medical school was at the time, is they didn't have the resources to teach us that food can be medicine. And now we see it plain as day. You've talked about really doing your best to reduce or eliminate oil altogether. Cut out all dairy products from cows. Of course, you can do plant-based. Plant-based dairy is just you could make it in your own home. It's just made from nuts or soy or rice or oats, and then looking at eating lots of fiber from plants. But what about specifically the harm that comes to our hormones by eating animal flesh, by eating fish and cows and chickens? Why does that disrupt hormones?
Okay. By the way, first, to the point you were making earlier about finding a doctor who understands this, there are different sites, and the one that I might recommend, if you go to the website pcrm.org, that's Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, pcrm.org, and just in the little search thing, put "find a doctor." You'll see lots and lots and lots and lots of names that come up. And our clinic, about 5 years ago, we launched a primary care clinic because we were doing so many research studies that other people could not participate in if they didn't have exactly that condition. So we have a primary care clinic here. It's called Barnard Medical Center, and we do telehealth visits.
Excellent.
Yeah. So many states of the United States, people can do telemedicine if they are able to. And then we're gradually expanding beyond that. So it's just barnardmedical.org.
Excellent. I'll make sure the links to everything you mentioned are in the show notes of today's podcast at learntourhealth.com. That's exciting that someone could work with you or one of your staff members, one of your colleagues, and look at their specific needs and adjusting their diet accordingly. So getting onto I'm really excited to understand specifically what it is about eating animal flesh that disrupts our hormones.
Okay. If we are speaking of insulin, insulin is a hormone that is made in the pancreas. It goes through the bloodstream to the surface of a muscle cell. And let's say I'm eating animal flesh. I'm eating a hamburger. The hamburger is some protein, but a fair amount of fat. Even if it's quote unquote lean meat, there's a surprising amount of fat in there. Even if it's chicken, it's probably the leanest chicken. You take off the skin, it's only chicken breast. It's still about 23% fat. That animal fat is absorbed by the body, enters the muscle cell, and then when insulin tries to get that cell to do what it's supposed to do, which is to pull glucose out of the blood, the fat stops it from working. It's fat. The fat in animal products interferes with insulin sensitivity. It causes insulin resistance. That's also a problem with PCOS. In women who have polycystic ovary syndrome, they are very often insulin resistant as well. And so getting the animal products out of the diet means there's no animal fat to interfere with insulin action. The other thing about it is that animal products don't have certain things in them. They don't have any fiber. They don't have any complex carbohydrate. And so as a result, fiber normally helps the body to eliminate excess hormones. Your liver removes estrogens from the blood, and it sends them through the bile duct into the intestinal tract, and out they go. But it only works if fiber is there to escort them. Fiber is like a broom that sweeps it out. And if you ate chicken breast or salmon for lunch, they're not from plants, they're from animals, so there's no fiber in them at all. And if that's the case, the estrogens in your intestinal tract that the liver carefully removed, they don't go through the intestinal tract anymore. They're reabsorbed back into the blood. So the fiber is essential to making that happen. So what's wrong with animal products? They got a lot of fat, they don't have any fiber. And if you want a contaminated product, animal products are always the worst. They are the ones that tend to be filled with chemicals much more than plants.
Well, that makes sense. We've heard that eating a sardine there's less mercury in a sardine than in a tuna, because the tuna went around eating all the sardines, right? And so if the cow is consuming tons and tons of grain or whatever soy, whatever it's been fed that has pesticides, concentrate in its muscles. And then when you eat the cow, you're getting the concentration of all the feed it was ever given with all those pesticides and chemicals. Even organic, I have to question. So what about the idea that there's hormones in animal meat that, if you're eating a cow and the cow had its own hormones, even though it says no hormones added, the cows were making their own hormones. Is that a factor? I mean, we're eating the estrogen that was once a cow's estrogen.
I think it matters for dairy. I think it matters less for meat. And the reason I say that is dairy products are, well, on meat, just very, very quickly, if you go out to a farm, many of the cows will have hormones injected into a little pellet on their ear that will release either a testosterone or synthetic testosterone or estrogen or synthetic estrogens into their blood. And the reason the farmers do it is that they get better growth of the animal per unit feed, so it makes money for them. But with dairy, it's a bigger issue because every glass of milk you ever had came from a cow who was impregnated annually, which, by the way, is not a treat for anyone. If you ever happen to go by a dairy and say, I want to see how you artificially inseminate your cows, it is a creepy process. Mm-hmm. And the other creepy thing is that after 9 months of gestation, their babies are not allowed to stay with them. Their babies are taken away. And they're basically go through this annual procedure where they're artificially inseminated, their babies are taken away just so that we can take their milk, which nature had in mind something else. So apart from the ethical issues of it, they are milked during much of their pregnancy. A pregnant cow makes extra estrogen and extra progesterone, and it gets in the milk, and the milk concentrates them as it's turned into cheese. And the average American adult eats 37 pounds of cheese every year, plus milk, plus ice cream, plus yogurt, plus butter. And so you're getting estrogens and other hormones from the milk and the milk products. Now, people will rightly say, it's only a trace. True. However, it clearly, in research studies, you can see a clear-cut association between dairy consumption and fertility issues in men, in cancer mortality in women, in breast cancer incidence in women. A brand new study from California just showed substantially higher risk of breast cancer in milk-drinking women. So how much estrogen do you want to feed to your 7-year-old daughter or your 8-year-old son? It is completely unnatural. But, you and I, we all grew up with this idea, milk for strong bones. Nature said, wait a minute. Cows don't make calcium. Cows eat calcium. It's an element in the earth that gets into grass. And if you're eating vegetable matter like grass, you get calcium. Well, hopefully you're not eating grass, but you're eating broccoli or kale or collards or Brussels sprouts or other greens that you like. That's where calcium comes from. The whole idea that you need dairy for calcium is it's an invention of the dairy industry.
I've heard, possibly you said it, that there was a study where they looked at a meta-analysis of all the countries that have the lowest rates of osteoporosis, and they found that those that drink the least amount of dairy or no dairy actually had the strongest bones in comparison to those countries that drank the most cow dairy had the weakest bones, the highest rates of osteoporosis. Can you speak to that?
The evidence that dairy products help protect against bone fractures is extremely weak. Not that it hasn't been studied. The dairy industry has been very eager to come up with health rationales for consuming a bowl of ice cream. But the fact of the matter is, it really doesn't work very well, and all kinds of problems come along with it. One of which, by the way, anyway, to just speak to your point, there are confounding variables here. People who tend to avoid milk have a number of other health benefits. They're eating other things, and so that may account for why they have stronger bones. But at a minimum, you just can't really find robust research showing that dairy helps. I think that's the most conservative thing to say. It's just not going to benefit you. But along the way, a researcher at Harvard named Dan Kramer years ago started looking at infertility. As you know, when women are maybe in their mid-20s, that's sort of peak fertility time. And when she's 10 years older than that, she's in her mid-30s or late 30s, her fertility is less. And she started getting calls from her mother who says, I know your career is important to you, but you better not wait. Your clock is ticking, that kind of stuff. So Kramer looked at a variety of countries, and he looked at the decline in fertility as women go from their late 20s to their late 30s. And he compared it to dairy intake. Thailand, not a big ice cream eating country. Cheese pizza is not their thing. It's not a lot of dairy in Thailand. And the drop in fertility during that time, from the late 20s to the late 30s in women, is maybe about 25% reduction. Then you look at Brazil. Brazil, a little more dairy, more cheese, about a 50% loss of fertility during that time. You look at the United States, where it's all dairy all the time, and the reduction in fertility is about 80%.
Jeez.
And if you look at a variety of other countries, it's not a perfect pattern, but it's quite compelling that high dairy intake appears to interfere with ovarian function. And what we are speculating is the issue is that the problem here in this case isn't just the estrogen or progesterone from the cow, but it could be, surprisingly enough, dairy sugar. The sugar in milk is lactose. And in your digestive tract, if you can digest it, it breaks apart to release galactose, Galactose, galactose. Galactose and glucose come out of the lactose sugar. The galactose can be toxic to the ovary. And what supports this is that research has also shown that galactose is linked to ovarian cancer. So what we think is happening is that there's not free galactose in much of anything that people eat. Very little of it, and your body doesn't take it in. But dairying countries, dairying regions of the globe, maybe many thousands of years ago, started to spawn genetic mutations so that in some populations, particularly what you might refer to as Caucasian populations, carry this mutation so that they can break down the lactose sugar to release galactose. And they think this is a wonderful advantage because I've got a new food source and I don't get the digestive problems that the rest of the world gets. I mean, most of the world is lactose intolerant, so you get diarrhea when you drink milk, but not these white people. So for white people, maybe 85% are lactose tolerant. They don't get digestive symptoms. Well, that's not so great, because what happens is then you are digesting this sugar to release galactose into your blood, which is going to harm your fertility, increase the risk of ovarian cancer, according to the best evidence we have, and create all kinds of havoc that nature never thought in a million years humans would find nutrition in the udder of a cow. But people are creative. I mean, we stumble into all kinds of problems. And so there you have it.
You've taught us how to naturally decrease the estrogens to healthy levels. What changes can we make in our diet to healthfully increase progesterone for women who have low progesterone?
Well, it's largely a question of balance. And so if you bring down the estrogen in the right way, progesterone will take care of itself. Now, there are people who will say that yams have natural progesterone in them. That's true. But the bioavailability of it is modest, in my view. And there are people who will turn it into creams that they will sell you, and you'll see them online. I am not aware of any toxicity of them. You can certainly try them. You look up natural progesterone creams. They're typically yam derived. Perfectly fine. Whether they will work for you or not is another issue.
So as it's a matter of eating so healthy, the body comes back into balance. Well, the idea that sex hormones and stress hormones are derived from fat that the body takes, isn't it a form of cholesterol that it then turns into these hormones?
Yeah, isn't that funny? Cholesterol is a bad actor, and it really is. But your body actually does make modest amounts of cholesterol to turn into testosterone and estrogen and a variety of other compounds. So cholesterol is sort of this raw material. Where we run into trouble is if we start eating cholesterol from eggs or other animal products. One area that's been a surprise is and you're speaking about these hormonal changes. Menopause is a time when many women really suffer with hot flashes. Mm-hmm. And here it's not so much the hormones causing it as the hormone roller coaster causing it. So your estrogen levels were high when you were 48, but now you're 52, and your hormones have changed dramatically. And so you get hot flashes that can persist. And back in the 1980s, I believe it was, a researcher from McGill University named Margaret Locke went to Japan. She interviewed about 1,200 women, and they just didn't report hot flashes.
Really?
And the question was, well, maybe Japanese women are kind of reticent. They don't want to talk about their intimate things. So she did really in-depth interviews. She said, no, I was, it's kind of backache, when I went through menopause. I was a little moody for a little while. Did you have hot flashes? No, didn't really have it. There was no Japanese word for it. Same with China, same with parts of rural Mexico. And what all these places had in common was that their dietary staples were plant-derived. There might have been some animal products, but not much dairy in particular. And when Japan westernized, McDonald's and KFC and everybody came in, and rice was discarded in favor of chicken and pizza and dairy, we started to see hormonal problems come in. Breast cancer rates doubled. Menopausal symptoms became common. Depression became much more common. And the other piece is that soy products seem to have an anti-hot flash effect. So anyway, in Your Body in Balance, when I wrote this book, I described all of this. I talked about soy, and I suggested that women who have hot flashes go on a vegan diet and consume soy. A woman called me up about 6 weeks ago. She said, Dr. Barnard, I did what you said. So I got terrible hot flashes. But she said, I did it in a certain way. I didn't want to just do soy milk. I thought, maybe I could just, you don't know what it is in the soybean that's good for you. She said, I took my pressure cooker and I just took whole soybeans that I got at the co-op and I threw them in there, and I've been eating a half a cup a day. And my hot flashes were gone in 3 days. And that's like, holy cow, that's amazing. And now whether this will work for a large group of people, I don't know. There have been quite a number of studies on it. And what intrigued me was that these studies have been done on extracts or soy foods where it's a part of the soybean. But in her case, she said, I'm going to use the whole damn thing. I'm using the whole soybean, half a cup a day. So if anybody's listening to this broadcast and hot flashes are driving you crazy and you can't sleep more than 90 minutes at night without being awakened by night sweats, you might try this approach. No animal products in your diet at all. Keep oils low. Take out your Instant Pot. Boil up a big batch of whole soybeans, which you'll find online. Have a half a cup of them a day on your salad. They're like pine nuts, really, on your salad. Or half. It's really not much. You just eat them and see what happens and let me know.
That's fascinating. I heard that the plant estrogen, the phytoestrogen, actually binds to our estrogen receptors, and thus blocking our real estrogen from taking hold. And so it sort of lowers estrogen dominance in that way, because people, there's so many misconceptions about soy, like that it would cause men to have breasts, and which is not the case. It actually helps to like lower the estrogen to healthy levels. Plus, you mentioned that it has the fiber, which helps our body to regulate estrogen. That's great for women, but is it healthy for men to eat a half a cup of cooked soybeans a day?
Sure. If you happen to go to the gym and mention that you like soy products, and some other guy says, that'll give you a man boobs, that's what you're talking about, this concern that soy will make a man effeminate. Go to the beach in August, and if you'll see a kind of a chunky guy taking off his shirt, and you notice that he's got a little bit of breast enhancement, go right up to him and ask, how much tofu did you eat this week? How much, tell me about your soy yogurt consumption. I mean, he's going to say, what are you talking about? I don't know that stuff at all.
I drink beer and I eat cheeseburgers.
And wings.
and
so forth. And the reason, what has happened in his body is that as he's eaten animal products and the fat they contain, he's gained weight. And body fat cells are not just bags of calories. Fat cells convert testosterone into estrogen. Yes, and they do it even while you're asleep. And this happens in women and it happens in men. And so as he's gained weight, he's got more estrogen in his blood. And so some of what he's got at the breast area is fat. Some of what he's got is breast tissue. Now, don't get me wrong. Gynecomastia, a little bit of breast tissue is extremely common. Most men have a little nubbit of it here somewhere, and particularly when they're an adolescent, but they can have it. But the idea that soy is encouraging that is not true. With regard to women, let me be clear. Soy products do affect your cancer risk, and here's how they do. They reduce it.
Yes. Soy
products reduce cancer risk about 30%. This is really important because you'll hear people say that soy has phytoestrogens that cause cancer. By about 2004, we had maybe 8 really good studies comparing women who consumed zero soy to consuming a really large amount of soy. I'm talking about soy milk or tofu or tempeh, something like that. And the pattern was striking. The women consuming the most soy had about 30% less risk of developing breast cancer. And then researchers started looking at women who had had cancer in the past. And all be darned, it did not turn out to be the case that their cancer would progress from soy. It was the opposite. Women consuming the most soy had about 30% reduction in the likelihood of dying of their cancer. And so what we now know is that there is more than one estrogen receptor on a breast cell, or on other cells too. There are alpha receptors and there are beta receptors. The soy isoflavones attached to the beta receptor. And so the way you can think of it is in your car, you got the gas pedal. You step on the gas, your car goes. You got the brake. You step on the brake, what happens? It stops. So you've got more than one estrogenic receptor. And if you're trying to calm things down, a product that attaches specifically to the beta receptor is going to be your friend.
Fascinating. What about prostate cancer?
It's quantitatively similar. Men who consume the most soy, once again, have about a 30% lower risk of developing prostate cancer. But there's more to it here. If you're consuming soy milk, you are not consuming cow's milk. Cow's milk, completely separate from soy, is a driver of prostate cancer.
Wow.
At Harvard, this must go back 20 years. The Physicians' Health Study, huge study. They brought in physicians because they're good reporters of their health and they track what they eat, and if you ask them to. And the men consuming the most cow's milk had about a 34% increased risk of prostate cancer. And they followed it up with a much bigger trial, and they showed that if anything, it was even higher risk, maybe 60% higher risk. And what we now know is that in the same way as a calf suckling from mother cow has an increase when the dairy products go into the cow's stomach, it triggers the production of something in the blood of the calf called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, that helps the calf to grow. So milk in the calf's body encourages growth. Well, you might be a 55-year-old man, but milk does the same. It increases the risk. It increases IGF-1 levels in your blood, And IGF-1 is a potent growth stimulus specifically for cancer cells. So you do not want to treat your body as if you are a calf hell-bent on growing. And there is a reason why nature does not ever permit adult animals to drink dairy products. Every single mammal drinks milk from their mother. Every single mammal goes through a weaning process where that growth stimulus is shut off. And human beings, being so creative and restless, we always figure out ways to defy what nature had in mind for us. So this lifelong suckling at Dairy Queen is creating all kinds of problems for us.
Fascinating. I could talk to you for hours about this. I know that you're very busy and you have to go. I'd love to have you back on the show anytime to continue sharing this information. I urge listeners to get your latest book, Your Body in Balance. Of course, the link to buy your book is going to be the show notes of today's podcast at Learn True Health. I love that you discuss how men and women can balance every hormone in their body. You have mentioned several times eating a healthy vegan diet. Of course, Oreos are vegan, right? So that would be considered the unhealthy vegan diet. For those who've never considered a plant-based diet to balance their hormones and decrease their chances of getting cancer and heart disease and diabetes, and also balance their weight accordingly, and also increase their longevity. You know, we could go on and on about the benefits of eating a whole food plant-based diet. Could you just wrap up the interview today by explaining what it looks like to eat a healthy vegan diet that promotes healing and decreasing disease?
Sure. Let me describe how we walk people through this change, because it's if you ever quit smoking or something like that, this transition is much easier than that, and the payoff is enormous. Here's how we do it, and I'll tell you what the foods look like. The patient comes in, they got diabetes, they want to get rid of it, or they've got cramps, they want to get rid of it, they got PCOS, whatever the issue is. Step one is we're going to take 7 days. During the 7 days, we're not going to change any part of the diet, but what we are going to do is take a piece of paper, and I'm going to write on the paper the word breakfast. And leave a little space, and then I'll write lunch, then I'll leave a little space, and I'll write dinner, and I'll leave some space, and I'll write snack. I'll say, please take this paper and come back 7 days from now, and I want to see a list of foods that have no animal products in them that you actually would like to eat in each category. So the patient says, that's it? Oh, yeah, okay. So, okay, great. So they come back, and they say, well, my first breakfast item is I have cornflakes with cow's milk normally, but I went to the store, and I got some almond milk, and it's pretty cool. So that's on my list. And I have oatmeal, but I have to top it with cinnamon and raisins, and then I like that. And I tried this vegan sausage that's pretty cool. So they got their list. For dinner, let's see, my partner and I went out. We went to an Italian place, and they made angel hair pasta with an arrabbiata sauce. The next week, we had a bean burrito without the cheese. You know, okay, great. You know, they got by 7 days, they got a pretty good list. So I say, now, step 2 is 3 weeks. During the 3 weeks, I want you to eat from your list. No animal products at all for the 3 weeks. You're going to be vegan now, but it's easy because it's only 21 days, and you already picked out the foods you like. That's it? That's all I want you to do. Okay, so you keep in touch with them because they'll hit some bump in the road. But after 3 weeks, 2 things will have happened. Number one, they're feeling better. They're losing weight. Physically, things are changing. But they also discover that their feelings about foods are changing because they haven't had any animal products for 3 weeks, and that is more than enough time to completely rethink your foods. And now you say to them, well, how do you like it? They say, well, I kind of like where I'm going. Can I do this for another week, doc? And I say, yeah, let's just keep going and see how it goes. Okay, great. So it's very easy. And then as the months go by, if they have diabetes, their medication requirements drop. If they've got menstrual pain, they discover it's changing. All kinds of things will change within their bodies. The foods are in 4 categories: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans or legumes. And so that turns into foods that are on an international scale staples for everybody. I already mentioned like pasta with a marinara sauce or vegetables, or in a Latin American restaurant, beans and rice and tortillas, or in a Chinese restaurant, rice or vegetables or tofu dishes. Or you go to the sushi bar. You don't have the fish sushi, but you have the cucumber roll or the sweet potato roll or the asparagus roll. You can have the seaweed salads and the regular salads and the miso soup. And what I discovered, I grew up in North Dakota. Every day of my life was roast beef, baked potatoes, and corn. Pretty simple diet. And when I went vegan, I now live in Washington, D.C. It's amazing. The palette of foods available is huge. And if somebody said, no, you can't have any more spaghetti arrabbiata, you can't have any more bean burritos, you can't have any more Thai food, Vietnamese food, Ethiopian food, go back to North Dakota and just eat your roast beef. That to me would feel depriving. A vegan diet is extremely vast. It does require kind of thinking things through a little bit, but after 2 weeks, you're a master. And now, instead of thinking in simple terms that foods cause me to gain weight or raise my cholesterol, you now have a much more complex view that foods allow me to control my hormones that control every other aspect of my body. I can control them for ill, or I control them for good. It's like driving your car. You can drive recklessly, or you can drive in a really careful way that gets you where you want to go. So the reason I wrote Your Body in Balance was to give this owner's manual to people. And if you don't mind, I want to brag just really quickly about
please do.
Lindsay Nixon is a genius in the kitchen, and she did all the recipes for it. And when she sent me the recipes, she said, Neal, you're going to really love these recipes. They're easy, they're quick, they're all 100% vegan, but they are so familiar and wonderful. And she's right. They're great. But she sent a note with them that said, Dr. Barnard, this way of eating that you're describing cured my cramps too. So I thought, okay, that's validation.
That's so cool.
I hope people will give it a try. And more importantly, I hope they'll share this with somebody else. Mm-hmm. The work that you do in sharing this information, not just me, but the other people that you talk to, you have a real talent for getting life-saving and life-changing information out to people. So I hope people won't just benefit themselves and keep it to themselves. They got to tell other people about what you're doing.
Every woman has a friend with horrible cramps or hot flashes or endometriosis. Like every woman. I mean, just and some men too that think about their sisters or their wives or their moms or some of their best friends. But think about it, like listeners, think about it. How many women can you list right now on your fingers? How many women can you count that that you're close to, that you're friends with, or your family with, or your acquaintances with, or your work with, that have expressed hormonal problems or concerns about breast cancer or anything related, or thyroid? How many women? I mean, most people I know, most women I know express concerns about their thyroid or on thyroid medication or diabetes. Like you said, 1 in 3 people in the United States are diabetic or pre-diabetic. The entire population would benefit from your book. So I know Christmas is a few months away. Now's a great time to buy several copies of Your Body in Balance and gift them early though. Don't wait till Christmas. Gift them early. Out of love and care for all the women and men in our life who suffer from thyroid, prostate, breast cancer, estrogen related imbalance. We can help. We can turn this ripple into a tidal wave and help so many of our loved ones. I wish I'd had your book when I was in high school. I was keeled over, suffering from cramps so bad. It was so incredibly painful. And by the time I was 19, I was told I was infertile and I'd never have kids. And because of nutrition and because of food, we conceived our son naturally, who's 5.5, and I'm currently pregnant with our second one. And that is all due to holistic medicine, is all due to using nutrition and using food and a whole food plant-based diet. So I'm a raving fan, and I know that I wish I'd had your book back when I was 16. So this is a book we could give to all the young women and all the people in our life we love. So I'm thankful that you came on the show. I'm thankful that you're spreading this information. I'm excited to dive into your book and those recipes. They sound great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And please come back anytime. We would just love to have you here.
Great. Well, thank you, Ashley. It's been really, really fun talking with you today, and thanks for spreading the word.